Good evening, everyone. We are all Caesurae members, and I'm extremely happy to have Professor Prakash Joshi with us today. Among the youngsters, two youngsters, Sagnik Chakraborty, who is going to make his presentation, and Oli Roy, who is also going to share her views once the presentation is over. Briefly about Sagnik, he is a presidentian from bachelor's degree to master's, and he's also completed his MPhil from Calcutta University. He's worked on partition fiction, and he is going to work for his PhD on border conflict, Eastern border conflict. About Oli is from Calcutta Xavier's and also Calcutta University, and she is teaching in St. Xavier's Burdwan. And Professor Joshi is from Allahabad University, and he's a friend of mine. And we are all Caesurae members, and it's extremely pleasing to have such company today, this evening, that we could all be together, though we are in different places, and thanks to technology for that. So I would request Sagnik to start with his presentation. First, you explain your topic, mention the title, explain your topic, explain Fugue, and then go ahead with your presentation.
Yes.
Over to you, Sagnik.
Okay, ma'am. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes,
Am I
you are.
audible, everyone?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, Oli, and good evening, sir. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm Sagnik Chakraborty. Uh, I'm currently teaching as a state-aided college teacher in Calcutta Girls College, Department of English. And today, my topic is his master's voice, Music and Death in Paul Celan's Fugue of Death and Roman Polanski's The Pianist. Uh, just let me know if you can see the screen. I'm sharing my screen.
Your voice is echoing, Sagnik. There is a Wi-Fi problem.
Uh, is it better? Hello, is it
Yes, it's
better now?
slightly better.
Okay. Can you all see the screen?
It's slightly better. Yes, it's better.
Okay. Uh,
Yes,
so today
I'll
my
have to.
topic is his master's voice, music and death in Paul Celan's Fugue of Death and Roman Polanski's The Pianist. So let me start with my topic first. Let me start with my presentation, and in the course of my presentation, I'll discuss about Fugue and the central theme of my paper. Now, W.H. Auden, in his poem Refugee Blues, uses the structure of blues, a style of music that evolved from the African American slaves, in order to express the fear and despair as experienced by a refugee couple during the Holocaust. In fact, music, both instrumental and vocal, runs as a recurrent motif throughout the various public and private narratives of the Holocaust. At a point in history during the Nazi regime, when humanity itself was facing a crisis, music served as a source of both pain and pleasure. At times, on one hand, as Paul Celan wrote in Fugue of Death, music became the voice of, and I quote, the master from Germany engaged in the final solution to the Jewish question inside the ghettos. On the one hand, music also provided a source of defiance and hope amidst the horror of the Holocaust. As an Auschwitz survivor, Shoshana Kalish testifies, and I quote, yes, we sang in the ghettos and concentration camps. Songs were sung even in the death camps. They were the only means of expressing our sadness and grief, defiance and hope. When our spirits sang, the songs took over. They helped us to keep our faith that life held some meaning. According to the definition of the San Francisco Bach Choir, A fugue is the most complex polyphonic musical form involving imitation among the parts called voices, whether they are vocal or instrumental. Paul Celan uses the structure of a fugue in his poem Fugue of Death in order to express the repetitiveness of death within the Nazi concentration camps and ghettos. Being a Jew who had lost his parents to the Nazi genocide, Celan was always in search of a language to express the trauma of the Holocaust. Literally, the term fugue has been derived from the Latin word fuga, meaning flight or escape. According to the Oxford Companion of Music, a fugue denotes a composition in which three or more voices, very rarely two, imitatively one after the other, each giving chase to the preceding voice. In fact, both Celan and Spielmann try to seek an escape from the horror of the Holocaust, an escape from the traumatic past, a trauma which was continuously being chased by the brutal memory, a memory knitted by death. Now, death itself runs as a leitmotif in Fugue of Death, creating a vicious cycle from where there is no scope of escape. If death is a master from Germany, it is a master in the sense that it totally controls its puppets, the Jews, while commanding them to strike up for the dance and play sweeter death's music. As Celan writes, and I quote, he shouts, play sweeter death's music. Death comes as a master from Germany. The question that may arise is where and how does music feature against the larger canvas of the Holocaust? Now, once a camp system was set up, loudspeakers were installed at every corner. Most of the concentration camps had its own anthem, generally considered to be an official signature of that particular camp. Guido Fackler wrote in the article Music in Concentration Camps 1933 to 1945 that the model for such concentration camp anthems was composed in the Borgermoor concentration camp near Papenburg. It was the Song of Borgermoor, better known as the Pit Bog Soldier's Song, that served as a primary model. The song was not the brainchild of the SS, but it spread among the inmates when they were transferred from one camp to another. In fact, Fackler suggested that the Pig Bog Soldier's Song soon turned to be the most popular of all the concentration camp songs, symbolizing both determined endurance and protest of the camp inmates. In some camps, certain pro-Nazi music from the radio or gramophone was played on the permanently installed loudspeakers. This system was probably used for the first time at the Dachau or Dachau camp in 1933 to civilize and re-educate the inmates, as in Foucauldian notion, to turn them, and I quote, into docile beings, where the order must trigger off the required behavior, and that is enough. Along with various speeches of Hitler, the propaganda of the Nazi Party and the national music by the German composer and anti-Semite Richard Wagner were also played on the loudspeakers. Later, the loudspeakers were used to announce Adolf Hitler's victories and achievements in order to break the inner resistance of the camp inmates. Music, probably in its cruelest form, also evoked from the commands of the masters from Germany. Now here you can see a particular part of an excerpt from the poem. Now music, as Celan writes in the poem, that how the maestro commands the puppets, the Jews, to stab deeper in earth, I quote, to sing, to play, and all those stuff. Celan writes, in order to control his puppets, the maestro, and I quote, grabs at the iron in his belt and swings it. In a particular scene, now let me come to this particular film called The Pianist. In a particular scene of The Pianist, a Nazi officer whips the dirty Jews to teach them some discipline and to celebrate the new year. Both Celan and Polanski evoke the absurdity within the concentration camps and narrate how the spontaneous human activities like singing and dancing were controlled by the power. Ironically, in The Pianist, the Jewish inmates were ordered to sing something nice in a loud and clear voice. Now the inmates sing out a song of unity with a fist full of courage and a heart full of anger. You can see the song that the inmates in the film, the Pianist, they sing out. Reunite together and follow the white eagle. Stand up and fight our mortal enemies. Rise on the day, let's give them fire and brimstone. We will do away the yoke of slavery. At a contrast, as a contrast to a larger canvas of Steven Spielberg's Schindler's List that includes a sprawling cast of characters and various technical devices, Roman Polanski's The Pianist is a painful documentation of an individual's survival amidst traumatic isolation. In fact, Ladislaw Spielmann wrote in his book, the name of the book is The Pianist, the extraordinary story of one man's survival in Warsaw 1939 to 1945. And you see in this book how Spielmann compared his condition worse than Defoe's Robinson Crusoe. Polanski's The Pianist begins in Warsaw 1939 with Ladislaw Spielmann, played by Adrian Brody, performing Chopin's Nocturne in C minor in the Warsaw Radio Broadcast Center. And I'll play that particular clip from the film where the film begins, where Spielmann playing Chopin's Nocturne in C minor. And just let me know if you can hear. Is it audible?
It is audible.
And we can see how Spielmann, till the end, he refuses to leave the studio till he was interrupted by the bombardments. Within a few moments, the sounds of explosion pierce through the walls of the broadcast center and violate the entire sanctum. As Alexander Stein has suggested in his article, Music and Trauma in The Pianist, that beyond the mere historical fact that Spielmann playing Chopin's Nocturne in C minor at that fateful moment, it can also be taken as an important musical statement interpretable on several planes. Now you see, Chopin composed his first nocturne, the one in E minor, only at the age of 17. The Nocturne in C minor was composed by Chopin in 1830 when he was only 20 years old. Although Chopin continued to make revisions to his original piece of Nocturne in C minor, it was published 15 years after Chopin's death. And now you see, in Chopin's C minor, what we see that there is an urge towards restless searching and yearning for something, perhaps a consolation, even as it continuously repeats itself and returns to its own beginning. Now, this very search for consolation and solace has always been a recurrent motif in the memoir of both Celan and Spielmann. In fact, the horror of the Holocaust has been so traumatic that Celan failed to find a way of escape from the trauma itself and committed suicide in 1970 by drowning himself. As Shoshana Kalish firmly believed that in Celan's Fugue of Death, the wound within the culture opens up in the discrepancy not only between the, and I quote, the golden hair Margaret and ashen hair Shulamit, but primarily between we drink, we write, we drink, we dig, and he writes. It is in this radical disruption of address between the we who drink and dig and the he who writes and commands that Celan locates the very essence of the Holocaust. Death and music come hand in hand in Fugue of Death, as Celan uses the structure of a fugue to express the very advancements of death towards its prey, be it in the form of bullet of lead aimed at a mark or hunts the Jews with his dogs. In Fugue of Death, death not only comes as a master from Germany, but also teaches an unforgettable lesson. Death as a maestro conducts an orchestra with his Jews that stroke darker the strings as the Jews climb to the sky, as the poet writes, as smokes, where there is a grave in the cloud. In a way, Celan uses the visual and oral pleasure of an orchestra to narrate the horror of the Holocaust, probably the most brutal performance of death's music. Now, in various camps like the Mauthausen concentration camps or in the Birkenau extermination camps, the camp orchestras were played as background music, both during punishment and the selection process for the execution of the Jews. Now, you see, during the Holocaust, one often witnessed a theatrical reproduction of violence and terror where the entire Jewish community became a target to be punished and wiped away. During the Holocaust, the spectators, during the Holocaust violence, the spectators either remained completely ignorant to such public violence or preferred to remain silent. The silence of the spectators, in a way, provides an assistance to the nation state, just like the king, which then continue to avenge on a particular dehumanized community without any resistance. Now, I want to talk about this. Now, despite the disaster, this is a particular moment. Now, despite the disaster, the violence, and the violation of the human rights and constitution, the world moves on like the plowman in Auden's Mew Debuts. Once or twice, the silent spectators may hear the splash or the 4-second cry, but they hardly consider to be important, as Auden revisits Bruegel's painting of the fall of the Icarus. The speaker tries to portray how everything turns away quite leisurely from the catastrophe. He describes how the plowman may have heard the splashing sound and the 4-second cry. However, it was not a significant failure. He describes something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky who had somewhere to reach and sailed calmly towards that destination. The brutalities of the Holocaust had such a profound impact on Spielmann, the language failed to be a mode of communication. A traumatic experience is generally followed by silence, as Spielmann wrote in the foreword to his father's book. And Andrzej Spielmann wrote his son, wrote in the foreword to his father's book that until a few years ago, my father never spoke of his wartime experiences. However, reading Freud's story of the train accident, there is often a return of the repressed, even if the victim has escaped the spot apparently unharmed. What returns to haunt the victim as is not only the reality of the violent event, but also the reality of the way that its violence has not yet been fully known. Indeed, there has been a return of the repressed in Ladislaw Spillman's life after a period of silence, or as Freud would term it, the incubation period. Now, one probably hears the sound of silence in a particularly scene of the pianist when Spielmann hides in a room where everything, as Spielmann writes in his book, that everything has to be done in silence. He was hiding in an apartment, and he cannot make a word, so he has to do everything in silence. Now, in her book, Beginning to Theorize Adaptation, Linda Hutchen writes that an adaptation might include a creative and an interpretive act of appropriation. Uh, and now she further writes that an adaptation might also include an extended intertextual engagement with the adapted work. In that particular room, although there was no piano in that room, according to Spielmann's memoir, it was Polanski's reading of Spielmann, an extended intertextual engagement through which one hears a pianist in silence. Spielmann sits at the piano, looks at the key, moves his fingers suspended just over the keys, and starts miming, playing Chopin's Andantes, Spiranto, and Grande Polonaise, one of the few pieces of Chopin not meant for solo piano. The scene communicates Spielmann's intimate relationship with the piano and the vast repertoire of music stored in his memory. Spielmann performs the piece in silence, probably a creative solution to the reality of his inner torment, loss, isolation, and silent solitude. The film ends the pianist ends with Spielmann concluding Chopin's Nocturne in C minor in a grand concert hall. After the war, the film ends with again Spielmann playing piano in a grand concert hall, accompanied by a full orchestra. In fact, the film begins with Spielmann playing Chopin's Nocturne in C minor, which was interrupted by bombing the Warsaw radio station. So the film begins with the C minor that was being interrupted at the Warsaw radio station and ends with a similar piece by Chopin, completing a circular structure. Spielmann concludes Chopin's Nocturne in C minor with a special sequence of notes known as Picardy Third, in which a composition in minor notes ends with a major chord. In a way, the film too ends on a major chord as Spielmann continues to enthrall the audience, suggesting the triumph of music and art. Although the voice of the master from Germany dominated a major span of both Celan and Spielmann's life, it failed to take away their music from them. The notion of death kept on repeating in various narratives of Celan and Spielmann, just the way a central theme of fugue does in a composition. Music stood out as a source of both pain and pleasure, a source of life and death during the Holocaust. One can never imagine the traumatic experience the inmates felt when Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was played during the execution process. On the other hand, music came as a messiah for many musicians who were part of the camp orchestras. Thus, music, with all its ambiguities, has always been and will always be a recurrent motif in various narratives of the Holocaust, be it of Paul Celan or Ladislaw Spillmann's. So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Sagnik. Uh, very comprehensive presentation, and it's wonderful the way you have weaved one into the other and connected that with trauma and the Holocaust. I would request Professor Prakash Joshi to take over the discussion now.
Um, I don't know what I have to, how I can initiate this discussion, but I would just like Sagnik to, just elaborate a little about and on how he came upon this idea to focus on music and to connect with the uh, horrifying experiences of that community during that period. Generally, music is associated, is considered cathartic in a positive way, so to speak. But then you, well, showed us the other side, the other kind of function of music. So, how did this idea, in a way, occur to you? How did you come upon this idea?
Okay, okay. Thank you, sir. Sir, actually, I'm from theater background, so I have been into theater for a long time, and
Mhm,
there from my theater background, I was associated with music. And when I was doing my post graduation from Presidency University, I came I had a teacher. I was very fortunate to have a teacher called Shuddhoshil Sen, Dr. Shuddhoshil Sen, and my initial love for music grew from Shuddhoshil Sen's classes, and later when when I came across this particular poem, and there was a point in my life when I was going through various films of on Holocaust. Like at a go, I was watching Schindler's List. I was watching Life is Beautiful, The Boy in Striped Pajamas, Pianist, and within a span of 1 month, I watched around 12 or 13 films. This
mhm,
particular film, when I was watching The Pianist, I saw that in the other films, such as Schindler's List or in other films, we see a very realistic depiction of the Holocaust. uh, not in the film Life is Beautiful, but at least in The Boy in Striped Pajamas, and in the Schindler's List, the depiction of Holocaust was different. But in The Pianist, I saw how music plays a very important role, and it comes in different forms. At the beginning, when we see at the starting of the movie, we see that the Warsaw radio station was bombarded. So there was a pause that came in the life of a musician, and how later music helped him to survive through the hardships of the Holocaust days. How music was his only friend and companion when he was hiding in an apartment, when he was trying to escape from a captain called Captain Hoschenfeld, German captain. So music always came either as his companion, as his messiah, as his best friend at a time when he needed it most. So there
mhm,
I tried to connect music, and I went back, and I tried to read about how music is an important motif in the Holocaust narratives. And then I came across this poem by Paul Celan, where he's also using the structure of fugue,
mhm.
and he's using death fugue in his poem. So there I thought to write a paper on it, and then I came across it. So it started from my theater background, and then my classes in Presidency University, and then my watching the films, and how I identified that music in different forms, how music is used in this particular movie, and then I came
Right,
across.
that's interesting. But another thing that when you played that short clip uh, here, I was wondering, looking at that clip or thinking of that movie. I haven't seen the movie, in fact. How is it? In what to what degree does music, of course, whenever you see a film, there is always some kind of background music, always.
Mhm.
And that background music goes with what, with the mood, temper of what goes on screen. So if there is a somber kind of happening on screen, then you have a somber music, and
Mhm.
vice versa. Now, here's a film, which I think I haven't seen the film, but in this clip I could see that the music is both in the background, doing its assigned job, and at the same time it's in the foreground too. Is it so?
Yes, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Uh,
Mhm.
act- uh, uh, s- uh, in this particular movie, I felt that this is not a this why music, as you were talking, sir. In this particular movie, I felt that uh, it is a journey of a music only. It's rather I see as a lone Jew. I see the journey of a pianist in this particular movie, and how music comes in both background and foreground. Of course, in this particular, in the opening scene only, we see uh, the bombardment, the shellings that was happening. It also it created a disruption in his identity, and how it was for his love for music. We see that that Spielman, the pianist, he denied to leave when others even left that particular room. He denied to leave. He was staying there till the end. So someone felt music was his identity, and this particular film is about a journey of a musician, an artist. We often read about an individual's journey, but in this film it is a journey of an artist, and how he decides to survive for the sake of his art, and how at the end his art wins, because the music, the film begins with Chopin's music, a nocturne in C minor,
Mhm.
and at the end the film ends with a particular note called Picardy third, which ends with a major chord. So from minor to major, it is the victory of art. It is the victory of an artist. That's what is interesting for me. It's not only a person's victory. It is not an individual's journey, but it is a journey of all the artists. It is a journey of an art through the horrors, and how the art is victorious at the end. That is interesting
Right.
for me.
Okay. Yeah.
Interestingly,
Okay.
Prakash, Oli, and Shagnik, just a few years back, I was watching a musical theatrical production by Shonak Chattopadhyay, and it was about Juddho Noy Shanti Chai, that no more wars, we want peace.
Mhm.
And this idea of art surviving over all kinds of trauma or whatever might happen, that particular scene, that there's bombardment going on everywhere, and so a man who is playing his piano, and anything might happen, but his piano should go on. So that was wonderfully portrayed. It just reminded when I just saw that particular clip, and as Shavnik wonderfully put it, that art has to survive over everything,
Mhm.
over mortality, over war, over everything. But I didn't know that Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was played during the war. We associate Wagner with the
Mhm.
Holocaust.
Yeah.
No, ma'am, actually, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, there are narratives like this, that Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was played in accordance with the with the Holocaust, like at that moment when the Jews were burned alive. In at that time, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was played in synchrony with the horror. So they were played by the Nazi guards, and at a time music also helped people to survive. If I had been a musician, or I had been a poet, I had a better chance to survive if I had been a common person, because the moment I enter in a concentration camp, two queues were made. One was on the left hand side, the other was on right side. The left side was generally for the old people and the kids, because they were of no use. They would not provide any laborer's job, so they were killed immediately. The queue that went to the right side, the line that went to the right side, there, if I had been a musician, or if I had been an artist, my chance of survival increased. And that is also shown in this particular movie as well. Because he was a musician, he gets a job to serve in a restaurant which was a Nazi restaurant. However, his family members were killed. That is so painful. His brother was killed, and a very interesting scene is also there. His brother, Spielmann's brother, and they were sitting in a queue, and Spielmann's brother was reading out few lines from a very well-known text called The Merchant of Venice, where Shylock is saying, "Hath not a Jew's eyes," and that is where the Polanski is connecting Shakespeare's Merchant of Venice and the hatred towards the Jews that is still prevalent. So, and he was reading out from those lines, the lines in Act 3, Scene 1, Shylock's lines.
Yeah, Shangnik,
Yes.
that was an interesting bit of information you just pointed out, that Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was played while the horrific, act of killing was going on, and you said that the guards were playing that. So I've never heard that. It's a new piece of information for me. So how were they playing? I think background, the playback music was not available. So
Uh,
were
uh,
they the guards
no,
playing on their own instruments? How were they playing that?
they generally appointed all the musicians who claimed themselves to musician, the Polish musicians,
All right.
and they also had loudspeakers installed in
Mhm.
various corners of the
Right. Yes.
of the
Loudspeaker.
camp.
I
But
get it
they
now.
preferred Wagner more than they preferred Wagner over Beethoven, of course. But Fifth Symphony was played at times. So there are narratives like that as well.
Okay.
Interestingly, music has been used by so many film personalities. Like Fifth Symphony has also been used by Satyajit Ray
Mm,
in Khorekaide, the
mm,
expository scene standing for revolution, but in a very different. Of course, there have been improvisations, but in
mm.
a very different context. So it's how I mean, music itself is being contextualized according to the artist who wants to do it, and how it connects with Holocaust. That's the most interesting phenomena. Like how music, I mean, this Western classical music, how it connects with Holocaust. I mean, something which is so different from what's actually going on. So that possibly is the area of psychoanalysis, and I'm just kind of reminded of Agamben, Homo Sapien.
Mm. Of course. Ma'am, you were talking about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, how it has been used. There is a recent film called Meghe Dhaka Tara by Kamaleshwar Chattopadhyay. In Meghe Dhaka Tara as well, the Beethoven's Fifth Symphony has been used with the rising of the people, uh, with the rising of village people, with the rising with Ritik Ghatok's ideology. With that we see Beethoven's Fifth Symphony as well. So Beethoven's Fifth Symphony has been used in various contexts. People have used it in various ways, of course. I have seen Beethoven's Fifth Symphony being used in I think it was in Kaushik Shen's production of Macbeth. So there are various moments when Beethoven's Fifth Symphony was used in various contexts, of course, because of its appeal and because of its nature.
Oli, would you like to join us? Oli is working on trauma. So I had asked her to join us over here.
Yes, I would like to talk a bit about the politicization of music that took place during this Nazi regime. I was looking into it, and since we are talking about narrativity and the expressions that music can form and create, I would like to bring in the context of politicization of music, taken from Sagnik. Actually, Sagnik is speaking of the music that was played in the Jewish concentration camps. Hitler, as far as I understand, and as far as I have looked into it, um, in 1933, when the Nazis took over Germany, one of the things that Hitler was able to do, I believe, was also take over the media, the mass media per se. He had his minister, Joseph Goebbels, right? And interestingly, this individual, I mean, Goebbels, believed in the spiritual connection that music could create and with the people, with the essence of Germany, with the essence of German identity. So the segregation of music started then, I believe. Sagnik, am I right
Yeah,
here? I mean, you
of
are the
course,
one,
and
right?
and
So
that's why they preferred Wagner's music, because uh,
absolutely.
he
So
was yes,
on one hand we had Wagner's music, and on the other hand we had the Jewish musicians, Wagner's music, and then the music of others like Furtwängler. They were considered to be intrinsic to the German identity, the creation of that pure-bred identity. While the Jewish music, on the other hand, was of course confined, it was considered to be a degenerate music that was meant to be confined within the camps and to be destroyed within the camp. So you see the association of Jewish music, the playing of Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, along with the tortures and the toils and everything else that the the concentration camps were meting out to the Jews, draws a connection between the horrors that the Jews had to face and the form of music that would sort of intensify the horrors per se. And on the other hand, we had these other forms of music that would work within the creation of German pride and aura. Right, so music therefore was used as a political weapon. It was politicized. So
of
that's
course,
something that I found to be very interesting here.
yes,
Very
if I can,
interesting perspective. Yes.
yes,
Very
yes.
interesting perspective. Yes. Yes.
And only if I can talk a bit about it. See,
Yes, Tanvi.
the irony was that often the music, the anti-Semite music, was played by the camp prisoners only. Like
Yes,
they
they
were
were forced
playing
to
the
play.
music. Yes, they were forced to play at gunpoints uh, a music that was actually discriminating. That was They were actually playing the music that claimed the German Aryan race supremacy. It was being played by the Polish inmates. It was played by the camp inmates, because if they
Yeah,
did not do that, they would have been killed at that very moment. And I have
absolutely.
read, I came across an incident, a narrative like this, where uh, the musicians were playing music when their family members were being burned. So they had no idea that they are playing the music. They could see black flames coming
Absolutely.
out from the chimneys, and they
Hmm.
were playing music outside. They had no idea, because until and unless they went inside, they had no idea what was
Absolutely.
going inside.
Every instance of burning in the gas chambers was accompanied by
By
music. It was
music,
always
yes, yes,
accompanied with music. Yeah,
of
that has
course,
been there. So
associated.
I want to bring in a bit of a psychoanalytical perspective to this. So you see, in a way, we find this use of music, or rather, this uh, sort of rather, I would say, this lack of focus on a certain form of music as creating an erasure of memory, sort of a fabricating of a national amnesia that yes, this race doesn't exist. Okay, that in fact, Goebbels, in one of his speeches, he does talk about how Jewish musicians ought to be replaced by purebred Aryan German musicians, that it was a lack that they were trying to fill in, that they're trying to fulfill. So this fabricating of national amnesia becomes very important to them, that Jewish music and musicians must be repressed. And the Jews, on the other hand, if we look at the history of Jewish musicians, we would find uh, uh, that it's kind of natural to them, right? If you look at the different articles and documentaries which speak of this, the Jewish musicians, I mean, Jews have had a very natural inclination towards music. In
Of
fact,
course.
the tapestry of German music prior to Hitler's regime was quite diverse, and then Hitler comes in and he sort of tries to create this sort of contention, this difference between the two forms of music, this the pure one and the degenerate music, as he and his ministers would indicate in their speeches and in their propaganda, right?
Of course, of course, of course, of course. Actually, that was so true. That was so true. And the fact is that the things were completely, at times they repeated the same thing in various camps. And the fact that I particularly believe that the personal narratives are so very important in these cases, because we are hardly left with any such narratives. And it is same for partition narratives as well, because in both the cases the personal narratives are also so very important, because uh, in both cases we always see there that we try to create a larger narrative, uh, but out of that larger narrative, both you are talking about this, how the Aryan supremacy theory, they try to create a larger narrative. Always in such genocide you always get a macro narrative vis-a-vis the micro narratives. So I particularly believe, in order to highlight or in order to address the trauma, be it in partition cases or genocide or in Holocaust cases, the the micro narratives are very important.
Yes.
Of course, of course.
Absolutely, absolutely. And to take a cue from what Professor Sengupta was speaking of, she brought in Agamben. So songs, forms of narrative, which sort of assert the creation of identity, right? It's a witnessing of the trauma through music, through songs. That's also an important part. Uh, and I am reminded of another instance of historic brutality, the African American slaves, right? And the slave songs, which eventually did translate into jazz and blues, and to talk about rap music today.
Of
It
course,
also
of course.
traces back to the jazz and the blues. So it's a witnessing of trauma, witnessing of transgenerational trauma, witnessing of these brutal incidents in history that has been done through these forms, through these semiotic forms, songs and structures, etc.
Of
Right,
course.
music. Yeah.
I guess it has generated a very interesting discussion, and I'm so happy that Oli, that you responded so well to Shagnik's presentation, and it has actually brought forth many issues. Like, first of all, I mean, something as horrific as the Holocaust has such a close connection with some of the masterpieces in Western classical music, for one. And secondly, it's how the human nature would want music to be played just when, this butchering is going on. And thirdly, that it's only through music, no matter how repressed, oppressed you are, looking for some kind of liberation. Or I guess it's only art which allows you to survive and triumph over life, over any kind of disaster. So this were some of the points which just came to my mind, which kind of came up in the discussion that we have been having, and also the intertextuality of music, films, poems, and how musical connections, uh, are there with the other texts in of art, theater, uh, other films, or just like, as Shagit mentioned, Megadagatara, giving way to another Megadagatara. So this is wonderful. It's a kind of, weaving one context into another context and across cultures, I should say. And that's how, since we are part of the Caesurae collective, and we generally try to link everything to cultural translation, so this happens everywhere. We cannot live without cultural translation. When something stands out as really a masterpiece in art, we feel drawn to it in different contexts, and specifically in contexts which trouble us, which we cannot stomach, which we are trying to kind of digest, and but we are not able to. Just as the Holocaust is, just as the partition is something that always bleeds, and we are still yet to come to terms with it. I guess it's only music which can possibly show us the way in different ways, and it totally depends on the human psyche, how music is being used, for what purpose it is being used. And I leave the rest of the discussion to Prakash.
Oh no, nothing. I have nothing to add.
Prakash?
Yeah. Uh, am I audible? Hello. No, I
Very
have
much
Yeah,
audible.
you
nothing
are.
to
Yes.
add.
Yes.
I have nothing to add. I have nothing to add now. Hello. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Okay, okay, sir.
Professor
Oh.
Lucy, you
And
have
I said I have
got
nothing to add here.
Okay, okay, sir. Thank you,
But
thank
I
you.
liked Oli's perspectives. Whatever she added, that was great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Oli, as
Yeah.
well. Uh,
Thank you,
Thank you
Shagnik,
once
for
again to
bringing
Shagnik.
this topic to the
Thank
fore.
you, Oli. And thank you. And we look forward to many such discussions. And Prakash, I hope that you will be with us. We are trying to schedule, no matter how brief it is, kind of a
Mhm.
discussion from a presentation followed by a discussion by the young scholars.
Mhm.
Generally on Fridays we are trying to schedule it, but it's not really fixed that, I mean, that could always be changed, but we are trying to stick with that it happens on Fridays, and we want to keep
Mhm.
this continuity. So let's hope for the best. Thank you once again. Have a
Thank you so
wonderful
much.
evening, and see you again
Thank you so
Friday.
much.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Oli.
Thank you,
Thank
ma'am.
you,
Thank
Thank
you, sir. Thank you, Shagnik.
thank you. Bye.
Content the broadcast.